We're going to start off nice and easy. I'm going to have you tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey getting into politics.
Well, it's an interesting and a long journey. So I am the fourth of 8 kids. My father was career enlisted Air Force, and my mother had a GED. Both my parents worked to support this family of 8 children. We moved around in the United States a lot. And when I was 15, I was burned in a kitchen fire, my younger brother and I. It was a very long hospitalization. To this point in time, no one in my family had ever gone to college, although my parents were very bright and self-educated, not formally educated. So I got out of the hospital, told my parents I wanted to become a doctor, and they were pretty discouraging. And as a teenager, when your parents discourage you, you think that they don't believe in you or think you're capable. So my idea of rebelling was to leave home at 16, enroll in San Antonio Junior College or community college, get a job. I ended up enlisting in the military and thinking if I went into nursing, I could work at night to put myself through medical school. So I just kept working and going to school, got a degree in nursing, master's in education, was able to go to medical school, and then came to Iowa to do my residency in ophthalmology. And so, you know, throughout that journey, the goal was to become a doctor, get married and have kids, which I did, and really didn't think much about going into politics. However, as a practicing physician, I found more and more, and the same was true when I was a nurse, that paperwork and regulatory administrative burden made it difficult for me to engage and interact with my patients. And so as a doctor, I felt that the government was encroaching more and more upon how I could treat my patients and interact with my patients and making decisions that should be between the doctor and the patient, and decided that I was going to run for office. So had never run for office before, didn't even know the system, had no network or base to operate, but I was just passionate about making sure people had access to affordable health care where they, the consumer, the patient, were put in the driver's seat, and that respected the doctor-patient relationship. And that was enough for me to, work full-time as a doc and run for office, and then eventually was elected in 2020.
Right, and what parts of that experience have you brought into elected office?
Well, certainly, I have 2 parts. One is having grown up in very humble circumstances, grown up poor, knowing what it's not like not to have a network, to have, mentors, to have, access, but wanting opportunity and trying to chart a path to get there. And I think that has always stuck with me and helps me when I interact with other people, that I want to elevate other people to their full potential. The second is on healthcare. I certainly have a very large voice in healthcare. Whether it comes to Medicare reimbursement, Medicaid reimbursement, even some of the bills we just passed in the House, and that was accelerating kids' access to care, which is making sure that kids that need specialty operations or specialty care can, if they have to go to another state or come into the state of Iowa to receive that, they're not held up in months-long, even a year-long delay in getting the paperwork through the state Medicaid program in order to get access and approval for that care. And sometimes these are life-threatening delays for children. So accelerating kids' access to care, the Medicare Improvement Act, our Drug Act, which will lower prescription drug prices immediately and will save the federal government about $650 million. So things like that, you have an oversized voice, if you will, when it comes to making healthcare policy. The other thing is, as a scientist, I'm very interested in energy and the environment. So I chair the Conservative Climate Caucus, and our state in Iowa has a wonderful story to tell on energy and how we've reduced emissions. So 50% of our energy is from renewables in Iowa. Over 60% of our electricity is now wind, and we are a net exporter. So people think of us as an agricultural state, but we are also an energy state. So we have a great story to tell on what can be done when you embrace your natural resources and you have policies that allow you to go forward without, and we've done that without mandates and without emission standards. So meanwhile, we're making the planet cleaner and healthier, but we're having affordable, abundant, reliable, secure energy. So both of those things fit very well with my being on the Energy and Commerce Committee. As a 24-year military veteran, I am on the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I serve as the chair of the Health Subcommittee, and we have passed some extremely good policy. We just introduced our bill on prosthetics for recreational use, which we're hoping gets passed all the way through. also on emerging breakthrough therapy for the treatment of PTSD and suicide prevention. In our veterans, mental health care, residential mental health care, having access to that within 10 days. So we're going to continue the great work that we're doing, and all of that past experience comes into having a play in how you advance policy in Congress and how you work with both sides of the aisle to try to get things done. I think I could say that I'm solution-oriented, that I'm a problem solver, and that's what I'm hoping to get done. I'm not there to blow up on social media, just there to solve problems.
Right. And you know, there's obviously a big tension point in this race is abortion. You know, you knew it was coming. So, I mean, I'm sure you might have seen the story I did yesterday. But I mean, what's your plans for the future when it comes to abortion policy nationally, really?
Well, first let me just say this. My opponent is lying about my record, and she knows it. Secondly, I'm pro-life with exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. And I think one of the best ways to prevent abortion is to prevent pregnancy. So giving women the tools to empower them to make decisions on their timeline, whether that's access to birth control. And I passed in the state Senate a bill for oral contraceptives over the counter, have introduced the same bill at the federal level, have introduced bills for support and tax credits for in vitro fertilization, and also for universities and colleges to support pregnant women, have introduced a bill for the child care tax credit to be extended during pregnancy, not only after birth. So working on both prevention of pregnancy, giving women the tools they need, and also support for pregnant women. I'm in a group that is a bipartisan paid working leave group looking to advance paid working leave and support for families. It's pro-family and it's pro-women. But do I think in the future, President Trump has already said that there will not be a federal bill, as we know. The Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court turned that decision back over to the states. So currently, that decision resides with the states. Now, some states will have extreme abortion policies. 8 states now permit abortion up until time of birth. And the House passed that same bill in 2022, and there was only one Democrat that voted against it. Every Democrat except one voted for an extreme measure, abortion up until the time of birth. We also know that the vice presidential candidate on the Democrat ticket signed into law in Minnesota that you cannot resuscitate a baby who survives an abortion. I cannot think of anything more inhumane and uncompassionate. And as a nurse, as a former nurse, as a sister who is an OB-GYN nurse, and as a doctor, to have a baby born alive and not resuscitate or provide help for that infant, that child, I think we don't treat animals like that. So the Democrats have an extreme policy on abortion, but that decision has been turned back to the states.
Right, and looking at some other policies, you know, police and immigration. I mean, a lot of people in Iowa wonder, well, what's the impact of immigration policies here in a landlocked state where, you know, we're pretty far from the U.S.-Mexico border?
Well, that's a great question. And the first time I went down to the southern border as a member of Congress was in 2021. I went down with, at that time, Majority Leader McCarthy. And I said this very thing. You may be wondering why someone from Iowa would be down here at the border. I grew up in Texas. Interstate 35 runs the entire width of our country. So it goes all the way from the border, all the way to Canada, through the middle of Iowa. One intersects east to west in the middle of Iowa. That is Interstate 80. So Interstate 35 and Interstate 80 have been an avenue for both trafficking of individuals and people, for sex trafficking, and for drugs. We see that, and when you talk to our law enforcement, they will tell you precisely that. The amount of drugs coming into our states, their interdiction of drugs, whether they change from meth, now it's fentanyl and fentanyl alkaloids, the numbers of drug overdoses that they see, the number of times that they have to intervene, and high prices that affect everybody else also affect our law enforcement and our first responders in affording Narcan and naloxone to help treat drug overdoses. So what happens at the southern border absolutely affects everybody. Every state is a border state, whether it's people, whether it is gangs, whether it is sex trafficking and exploitation of children, or whether it is people on the terror watch list that have come into our country. We have seen in numerous cities that Venezuelan gangs, now Chicago is not that far from us here in the Quad Cities. In Denver, Colorado, that gangs have taken over apartment complexes. They're opening fire on the police. So police are concerned about support. They're concerned about measures to defund the police, to abolish prisons, which my opponent has supported. And they're concerned about ending qualified immunity, which my opponent also not only voted for in state government when she was in the House, but also spoke in favor of getting rid of qualified immunity, which is qualified. It is not blanket immunity. So support for our law enforcement, being able to keep us safe, which is one of the primary functions of both federal and state government, I think is very important. The border is certainly tied to that on a law enforcement level. With the amount of encroachment on our law enforcement, they're concerned for their safety as well as the safety of their communities. So we need a border that's secure. We need to have the Customs and Border Protection have the tools to secure our border, to stop drugs, and they feel that they have been sidelined into processing people, records amounts of people, over 10 million, people on the terror watch list, almost 2 million known gotaways. It is a crisis at our border, which was created by the Biden-Harris administration and for which the Democrats did not want to stop.
Right. And see, another thing that I've seen attributed to the Biden-Harris administration are those growing grocery and gas prices. Now, I don't know if you saw, on Wednesday I did a similar Verify story on the ad from your campaign. And I just want to hear from your perspective, why is it the Biden-Harris administration that is driving these prices higher?
Well, when the Biden-Harris administration came into power, inflation was below 2%. It was around 1.6% as December of 2020. They came into power in March of that year. They passed a massive spending bill, $1.9 trillion, supposedly for COVID, but it was not targeted, timely, or temporary. And when you flood the nation with dollars, with money, you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. So we already had supply chain issues. We had a whole bunch of money flooded into the market. And even Larry Summers, if you recall, Larry Summers was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. He was the economic advisor to President Obama. Larry Summers said in 2022 that all of this money was going to lead to inflation. By May of 2021, inflation had spiked to 5.6%. I interviewed Fed Secretary Jerome Powell at that time as part of the select subcommittee on the coronavirus crisis, asking him what temporary meant to him. That as a country doc, temporary meant to me 2 weeks, but it had already been 5 months. How much longer did he think it would go on? And he continued to say it was transitory. That then followed another very large spending bill, passed through reconciliation, and that fueled inflation. So it's definitely attributable to the policies of this administration. Even Democrat economists have said as such, and I stand by the fact that the Biden-Harris administration fueled the inflation. So the official number of inflation may have gone down, ticked back up, but what has not gone down are prices. And also remember, if they're telling you inflation is 3.2 or 3.5 or 3.9, it was 9% in 2022. This is year-over-year inflation, so it's cumulative. Inflation may have come down from 9%, but this is cumulative year-over-year. Prices are still up over 21%. Gas is still high. And I had a conversation earlier today about food pantries and the number of people going to get food assistance. A lot of that is because wages haven't kept in pace with the record amount of inflation. So prices are high. It's attributable to the policies of the Biden-Harris administration, and their solutions are only going to make things worse.
All right. Now, I want to get a little bit into the race itself. I mean, I'm sure you've seen millions and millions of dollars are fueling ads, especially for Christina Bohannan, as has been reported by Politico. And there's a lot of national attention on this race. I mean, it's one of very few that the Democratic Party thinks it can flip blue. Is that putting more pressure on you to perform this year?
I don't look at what nationally they think about this race. Every single day, I'm here to do a job, and that's to represent the people of the 1st District of Iowa. And that's what I do. whether it's in Washington, D.C., whether it's here in Iowa. I am meeting with people, I am visiting with people, I am passing bills. For instance, our Drug Act bill, which would lower prescription drug prices now, immediately, and save the federal government money. That comes about through listening to our constituents and trying to solve those problems for them. So is there a lot of money going to come into this race? Yes. In the last presidential election for this race in 2020, it was a $20 million race. Do I think that money could be spent better elsewhere? I certainly do. The attack ads on me started during the Olympics with people calling me in DC and telling me they're seeing attack ads. So that's part and parcel of this. My job is to, one, continue to represent the people of Southeast Iowa and the 1st Congressional District. And number two, make the case that I should be reelected because I have been the Congresswoman, the problem solver that Iowa's 1st District needs.
Right. And just in the last few minutes we have here, this is a rematch from just a few years ago. I mean, are there any differences you've noticed in this campaign?
Well, there's always differences when it's a presidential year. So we knew that this was going to be a targeted race. It's a swing district. It is not, even though I'm a Republican, it is not a ruby red district, so it's not a safe district. It's a swing district. We always knew it would be targeted. It is no surprise that last year the Democrats put me on the target list, flipping red to blue. This is a district that they want to get back into Democrat hands. So from that standpoint, to me, there's very little difference. The amount of money being put into the race, I think, as I said, especially on the Democrat side, where all this money comes from and comes from Act Blue, I think there are investigations going into that if there are improper contributions. But it's a lot of money to flip a seat. The lies are much more egregious and much more obvious than they were last time. But I've got a great record. I'm going to continue to stand on that record and what I have done as a member of Congress who is known to be bipartisan, known to pass bipartisan legislation. I've got several immigration bills as a Republican. I've got bills that look at housing, that look at child care, that look at access to health care and how we improve individuals' lives, how we look and make sure that regulation is appropriate. It's not hurting our small businesses or those who can at least afford to have the impact of bad legislation. So from that standpoint, I'm going to continue to do the work that I do, and I think our work will speak for itself.
All right, Mariannette Miller-Meeks, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you.